to help us as a chair. Sir, over to you.
Thank you very much, Ranveer, and thank you very much, Professor Anand Kumar. It's a great pleasure to be, on the panel with Professor Arun Kumar. I have a great admiration for both Professor Arun Kumar and Anand Kumar ji, and I really think that the presentation that Professor Arun Kumar made was an eye-opener, and I will try to take off from where Professor Arun Kumar left, and after understanding what the severity of the unemployment crisis that India faces, and vis-a-vis if we have to look at the crisis that agriculture faces, I think we will get a clearer picture as to where we are moving, or perhaps where we need to move. This is a very serious area, or a matter of concern, because globally today we are faced with a war against farmers. If you look at the developed countries today, there is a severe push to see that more farmers get out of agriculture. Already we know that in the developed countries, there are hardly any farmers left, but the effort, renewed effort, is to push these farmers or a section of these farmers out of agriculture. And that is happening in the name of climate change. We know what happened in Holland recently when a provincial election, we have seen the group of farmers and citizens winning the elections in a thumping way, and that of course sets a kind of a counter narrative to the way the government of Holland has been pushing farmers out of agriculture. There are about 11,000 farms in Holland, and the government has already served notice for 3,000 farms to quit farming. And the point is that because greenhouse gas emissions from agriculture globally are about 34%, and so therefore to reduce those greenhouse gas emissions or to take care of climate change, the effort is to push farmers out of agriculture, because they are being blamed for adding on to the climate change process. This is happening not only in Holland, it's happening in England, it is happening in Austria, it's happening in other countries of the European Union, and also if we see, it is also happening in a far down south, which is New Zealand. And New Zealand has imposed a tax on cows because of the kind of emissions the cows release into atmosphere. The point I'm trying to make is that globally there is a push, that the farmers face, and in India there is a kind of a struggle against which farmers are trying to survive. These two different scenarios should tell us where we are placed as far as agriculture is concerned. Professor Kumar very well said that in agriculture about 47% of the population or workers are involved, and which means roughly 60 crore people are involved with agriculture in India. 60 crore is not a small population, but over the years the economic thinking and the economic design has been to push these people out of agriculture or out of the rural areas into the urban areas, because urban areas need cheap labor, and that has been the kind of economic design that has been cast. Although we have not spelled out in our economic policies, but the thrust is that agriculture has to be sacrificed for the sake of economic reforms or for the sake of industry, because as was spelled out earlier, the entire focus has shifted to supporting the industry, and agriculture has been neglected. Now, the crisis that we see in agriculture, we all know, is agriculture is faced with severe distress. It has been prevalent for last several decades, is also because of something that we do not want to address or we do not want to focus. Whenever I look at the reports of the Planning Commission earlier, or the Niti Aayog, or the other academia of this country, I find everyone is talking of improving productivity, improving productivity, and that is kind of a way forward to improve the incomes of the farming community. This, of course, is a a kind of a narrative that has been built over the year. And what we say in Punjabi is "Dab ke baat raj ke kha," means the more is the productivity, the more will be your income. It hasn't worked. It hasn't worked. It hasn't worked in America. It hasn't worked in Canada. It hasn't worked in European Union. The point I'm trying to make is nowhere in the world the productivity increase has led to the kind of a income stability that the agriculture sector would be expecting or needs. And this, I think, has to be now corrected by focusing on not only increasing productivity, but also ensuring that the income levels or farm income levels go up so as to remove that distress and so also to make agriculture prosperous. Now, just because the economic thinking or the economic design is to push people out of agriculture, if you want to have a higher economic growth, the understanding is that you push people out of rural areas into the urban areas. And this, I think, was a outdated economic thinking. We have to now move out of it. We have done enough damage to global agriculture, and we have done enough damage to Indian agriculture by following this cut and paste kind of economic thinking, which thinks that agriculture has to be sacrificed for the sake of the industry. And that is why successive governments have deliberately kept agriculture impoverished. The Gandhian philosophy, I think, is something that we must refer back to see what exactly can be the savior or how we can pull out or make agriculture a powerhouse of economic growth. I think when the 1991 reforms came in India, there was a kind of a gap left by those policy planners, because they just cut and paste what the West wanted us to do. I think instead of industry being the focal point of or the engine of growth, I think the second engine of growth, the focus should have been on how to make agriculture the second engine of growth. I have said in many of my interviews that if you were to focus your attention on agriculture, you can address to large extent the crisis that we have seen in unemployment the country faces, or the employment crisis that the country has. So why I'm saying is this, because half the population is involved with agriculture. If 60 crore people become economically viable, it will have a kind of a impact on the rural economy and subsequently the national economy. More the money in the hands of people in agriculture would mean that there will be a bigger demand created. And once the demand is created, I think we don't have to look for booster dose coming from 7th Pay Commission or the 8th Pay Commission, whatever it's going to be in the years to come. I think we will see that there will be such a huge demand created. After all, they're going to spend the money in the markets, and that huge demand will not be a booster dose, but will act as a rocket dose. I don't know why our mainland economists can't understand. I think the problem I find everywhere is the moment you talk about this, there is a kind of a backlash or a troll that we have to face. And I find that is because people have not thought or moved beyond economics 101, that we thought that there is no other alternative. The alternative is to, of course, make agriculture economically viable. Now, before I go into it, let's see what the situation today is. In 2018, a report came out, a big study came out from OECD, the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, along with the New Delhi NGO ICRIAR. And that report said that between the period 2000 to 2016, means a period of 16 years, Indian farmers lost 45 lakh crores. They lost rupees 45 lakh crore, which means roughly every year they were losing out 2.64 lakh crores every year. Now, I didn't see any debate happening in parliament or any of the state assemblies or in the academia world or in the media world that, this is the kind of a policy paralysis that exists in agriculture. 5,000 crore lost to the industry, everybody will be up in arms saying there is a policy paralysis. We need to support industry with economic packages and bailouts and so on and so forth. But it happened to agriculture, nobody bothered in this country. It clearly tells us that the bias that exists in our economic thinking, and also the kind of a social barriers that we have created against agriculture. Why I'm saying this is that the 2016, when I'm talking of the 16-year period, as I said earlier, 2000 to 2016, the OECD report period. But let's look into 2016, when the economic survey itself mentioned that the average income of a farming family in 17 states of India, which means roughly half the country, is 20,000 rupees a year. Which means the average income that the farmers were living in half the country was less than 1,700 rupees per month. I can't even rear a cow in 1700 rupees. If you're living in a city, you can't rear a dog in 1700 rupees. Imagine how the farming families have been surviving, in less than 1700 rupees per month. And then came the report in 2019, the situational assessment survey on agriculture households. It tells us that the average income of farmers in the entire country is 10,218 rupees per month. This is at the lowest, one of the lowest as far as the pyramid is concerned. And this, we are thinking 10,218 rupees. Please, let's not forget, this also includes non-farm income. And otherwise, the studies will show very clearly that the income from farming alone comes to 27 rupees per day. This clearly tells us how the effort all these years to keep agriculture deliberately impoverished is working. And I remember at that time also many economists were excited that this is very good because we need to move people out of rural areas into the urban areas, because unless we accelerate migration, rural to urban migration, the country's economic growth will not happen. I think, as I said earlier, this outdated economic thinking has to go. And economists need to understand that there is another world that we need to look up to, and we need to see how sabka saath, sabka vikas can take place. And this can only take place if these people who are on the margins, subsistence living, are the ones who also get adequate income in their hands. Now, is it possible to provide agriculture in a kind of adequate resources, at the same time provide a kind of a living income for the farmers? The point Professor Kumar has made very well in his presentation is that the kind of investments that are taking place in India, you are actually all investing 95% into the urban focus or into the markets and so on and so forth. Whereas if you're investing only 5% on agriculture, what miracle can you expect when you are not making any public sector investment? Now, that is very clearly indicative. If you look into a Reserve Bank of India report, which between 2017-18 and 2022, it tells us that the public sector investment in agriculture were hardly 0.4% of the GDP. The public sector investment is in agriculture, if it is 0.4% of the GDP, and as I said earlier, we can't expect a miracle to happen in agriculture with these kinds of low investments, or with kind of almost zero investments coming into agriculture. Now, this has actually led on to a kind of a debate which brought the farmers onto the streets when the farmers' protest happened. Why? Because farmers realized that the economist, the policymakers, the academia is not in favor of helping farmers get a higher income. So that's what they decided, that they will have to take on the responsibility, stand up against the three laws which were actually drawing India or pushing India into the corporate agriculture trap. And so they wanted to save their land. They wanted to ensure that their income is not taken away and their land is also not taken away. And they fought for actually a guaranteed income. Now, when thousands of tractors walked into New Delhi or were at the borders of New Delhi for about a year, this massive protest has conveyed a very clear message that the distress in agriculture is because farmers are not being paid the rightful price. Now, if you think that markets can deliver the rightful price, that is what the mainline economists had argued at that time also, that markets are the best judge. They will provide the rightful income to the farmers. Sorry, that was again a flawed economic thinking. We have seen how markets have failed in America. Markets have failed in Canada. As I said earlier, in the rest of the developed world, markets have failed to provide farmers with higher income. If you look at America, today America provides a domestic support of 79 lakh rupees per year per farmer. Why? They are providing this massive support because they understand that otherwise the 1.5% of the population that remains in farming in America will also disappear. So they want to keep farms now at least viable, and that subsidy support is coming for that. If the markets were benevolent, I'm sure the American government won't have, dared to provide that kind of subsidy support. But the markets have failed. Look at Canada; it's still worse. And if you look at European Union, $100 billion is the support that they are giving to agriculture every year, and which includes 50% going as a direct income support. The point I'm trying to make is markets have failed everywhere in the world, in every crop, to provide farmers a reasonably good income support. So if markets have failed, and if we go on believing and we go on repeating that market is the mantra, markets will address, I only wish that, at least the economist, mainland economist salaries should have been linked to markets, because if they are so excited about the role markets play, why should they get a fixed kind of income and also the emoluments? Let them demonstrate that the markets are so benevolent. This, I think, is a missing factor that we need to focus on or bring up, that this can't be done, that everyone gets assured income, everyone gets a guaranteed income, all the emoluments are put in, but we believe that the farmers have to survive on A2 plus FL. A2 plus FL is the debate, the prices that we talk about when the MSP data comes up. A2 plus FL is the out-of-pocket expenses the farmers incur plus the family labor. So you see that cost, and then you give 50% more on it, and the government says we are giving a higher minimum support price to farmers. Whereas, as you all know, Swaminathan Commission had recommended a comprehensive cost plus 50% to be given to farmers. And if you look at the present the MSP figures that have come out, if we had followed the comprehensive cost regime that Dr. Swaminathan had suggested, the farmers, let's say in the case of paddy, would have got 600 rupees more per quintal, roughly 600 rupees more per quintal as the price. So the point is that, farmers, as I said repeatedly, that they are being deliberately kept impoverished. And I think the challenge is how to see that they get out of that kind of a trap where they are not getting the rightful income, or get out of the distress situation. And then, of course, if agriculture becomes economically viable, my understanding is that the pressure on creating more employment opportunities would also reduce. And this is the way forward, given that we are headed towards a climate emergency the world is faced with. And in that situation, food security is of paramount interest for any country. India cannot sacrifice its food security thinking that we will move on to the digital economy and to the concentration of artificial intelligence, digital economy, and robots, and so on and so forth. There are ample studies which show that this concentration of control over agriculture, or corporate control of agriculture, is actually leading to loss of jobs or loss of workers in agriculture. And at the same time, farmers are disappearing, and still further, we are moving on to synthetic foods. And synthetic food is something, I think, when I was talking about in the beginning, how there is a war against farmers in the Western countries, we must also, be aware that, what is happening, or what the kind of changes the West is trying to bring in. Let me tell you that the world's first food factory has been established in Finland, which does not require any land, which does not require any farmer. The company will produce food for millions of people. It is using using air, nitrogen, whatever, oxygen from the air, and then in combination with the bacteria, it is producing food. In fact, it was very interesting to listen to the owner of that company saying that what the new world, or what the new world is looking up to, is that they are actually in the position of manufacturing land. Because once you are not using that land, they say we are giving you more land. They're also saying that we are addressing the farmers' distress problem because we are not applying or not employing any farmers. So this is the world where this is a situation where the world is moving to. And don't think Finland is the only country. There are about 270 industries that are coming up all over the world on synthetic, which will be manufacturing synthetic foods. And that is what the industry is looking forward to. Even in Holland, where the focus is to push farmers out of agriculture, we all must know that Holland is the second biggest agriculture exporter. And this pushing these people out, the government is very clear that it is going to replace that with more protein being built up from insect farming and from octopus. So this is the kind of alternate changes that are coming up in Professor Arun Kumar did talk, the role that the robots and so on, or the artificial technology or artificial intelligence and so on is bringing in. But I think the threat is that it will push more farmers out of agriculture. So we are in at sorry, my coming in. But so I think we must understand that this is how it is built up. On the one hand, we have the economic forces pushing farmers out, and second hand, we have to ensure how agriculture becomes economically viable. Now, what is the way forward for a country like India? I think the best way is if we follow a triple approach. When I say a triple policy approach, the first, of course, is to make minimum support price a legal mechanism. When I say making minimum support price a legal mechanism, what all I'm suggesting is that minimum support price, already we announced minimum support price for 23 crops, out of which effectively it is applied to wheat and paddy, and where the government comes and procures. But for the rest of the crops, it's only on the paper. And I think what we need is to make that a legal right, which means there will be no purchase in the country. No one, whether it is the artias, whether it is the corporates, or whether it is the public sector agencies, nobody will buy below that price. When we say this, a lot of people start saying that the inflation will shoot up and the prices will go up and so on and so forth. We already are faced with a seller's margin all over the world, and we know what has happened. It is not because of the inflation that we see globally, is not because of the cost of production going up and so on and so forth, but it's because of profiteering. Now, the same phenomena, if we can tackle, I think we don't need to have to worry about inflation going up in that manner. That can be taken care of. But I think more important is, let's not forget, in India, the producer is also a consumer. If 50% of the population has more money in the hand, they're going to consume. They are the ones who are going to be involved in consumption. And I think that we must not forget that when we talk of consumption, we are forgetting that 50%, which is also producing food. So they are left on the margins. This is possible. Spain has brought out a law in 2020, which has said that, which says very clearly that no company or no one will be able to buy below the cost of production. This is not only confined to agriculture, this is confined to, or it includes, besides agriculture, horticulture, forestry, and also fisheries. And so, there is a kind of a mandate laid out, and if you are buying below that price, then you have a penalty. If you buy second time also, you have a penalty. But if you buy repeatedly, then of course you have a much bigger penalty coming in. So if a country like Spain has shown the way, I think India also has a possibility of looking into this aspect of assuring prices for the farmers. And don't think Indian farmers were the only one asking for a guaranteed price. In 1979, America also saw thousands of tractors ascending onto the capital, Washington, D.C., demanding an income parity. Income parity in terms is a term used by American farmers, but in India, it is guaranteed price. So American farmers were also fighting for a guaranteed price in 1979, and Indian farmers have demonstrated that globally, the kind of a protest that they had has clearly shows that all over the world, farmers are actually asking for a guaranteed income. And that guaranteed income will come from guaranteed prices. So that's the first factor that we must focus on and assure that, just like each one of us, farmers too need a guaranteed salary. Many believe that, the supply chain should be strengthened, and whether international or national. And then they believe that unless you add value to your produce, you will not get a higher income. That's the kind of narrative that is being built. I'm surprised that we do not want to look into the other side. Two examples I want to give you. Coffee is one of the best examples of value addition. Coffee is about a $2 billion industry globally. Coffee, as you know, comes from coffee beans. And coffee bean farmers, there are about 60 lakh farmers globally. Many of them, or majority of them, are living below the international poverty line. And that is what made some economists in America work on the crisis that the coffee growers face. And then ultimately, when they realized that there was a less of awareness and not many many people they could attract to this kind of a crisis the farming world was faced with. They approached Jeffrey Sachs, well-known economist, to take up this cause. Jeffrey Sachs did it, and he actually brought in a kind of a global fund for $10 billion. Imagine $10 billion to support the farmers. This is not even 1% of the $2 billion turn, $200 billion turnover that the coffee in the trade had. So it clearly showed that all these commodity exchanges and these kinds of things have not worked in the case of coffee. Farmers are still living in penury. The same is with the kind of chocolate. The chocolate industry is also a $200 billion industry, and the chocolate is a classical example that, again, the people who grow the cocoa beans in the Latin America or in Africa are suffering, and they have the kind of price they get. Half the population of the farming population, which is involved in chocolate also, is cocoa beans, is getting a income or is below the income that you and me pay for a bar, an average bar of chocolate whenever we buy a chocolate. So this tells you the kind of a serious crisis. So these are the two examples that I wanted to give you to understand that system hasn't worked also globally. Now, what the second part is that once you have done the MSP legal, I think the second more important is in India, we need to expand the network of mandis. One of the best ways to provide farmers with an assured income is to bring mandis closer to his farm. So what India needs is about 42,000 mandis, if we have to give a mandi at 5-kilometer radius, compared to the 7,000 mandis that APMC mandis that we have at present. This has to be, of course, accompanied by more storage facilities and so on and so forth. And finally, the third thing that we must follow is that learning from the example of Amul cooperatives, where out of the end price, if you are paying or buying milk from the cooperatives for 100 rupees, 82 rupees will go to the farmers. So we need to ensure that at least 50% of the end consumer price goes to the farmers. And for that, we need to lay out a cooperative system. We don't need a corporate system. We need a cooperative system in agriculture. I think if we look into these three kinds of approaches that we need to follow, perhaps we would be able to come out with a kind of a solution to move agriculture or to ensure that agriculture becomes the second powerhouse of economic growth in India. Once Sabka Saath, Sabka Vikas takes place because agriculture becomes economically viable, I think the entire economic situation or the economic crisis that we face because of the kind of investment that are going, the capital investment going to the industries and so on, I think we need to focus on making agriculture economically viable, and that is what will lead to agriculture, as I have repeatedly said, becoming the second engine of economic growth. With that, I'd like to thank and open up for questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, sir, for a very deep presentation, and you really brought the very quest of sustainable development in terms of planning the very idea which can free us from the challenge of unemployment. So it was very enriching and very, very insightful. I request Professor Jayanji, although we are running out of time, to initiate the discussion. Yes, Jayan Singh Tomar ji.
बहुत धन्यवाद रणधीर गौतम जी। मैं मंत्रमुग्ध होकर दोनों वक्तव्यों को सुन रहा था और मेरे पास शब्द नहीं है इस पर कुछ बोलने के लिए, लेकिन मैं ये समझता हूँ कि दोनों वक्तव्यों को बिल्कुल ट्रांसक्राइब करना चाहिए और इसका वितरण किया जाना चाहिए। पहली बार ऐसा आयोजन, ऐसे दो वक्तव्य मैंने सुने हैं जिनको सुनने के बाद मैं निश्चित बहुत आभार। धन्यवाद।
Thank you so much, sir. It really needs transcription, and we will transcribe this these two important lecture, which not only solve the problem of unemployment, but also giving a kind of orientation of revisiting our idea of planning. And we will invite Dr. Devendra Sharma, sir, in our coming GSDS Weekly Forum Dialogue series that is on Swaminathan Ayog, and we have so many initiatives. We have already had so many plans for economic model of development, from Bombay plan to Gandhian plan to LPG policy, and we are now visiting the idea of degrowth, and not only in India but also West. The book that has come from Club of Rome, that is Limit of Growth. So incorporating all these dimensions, and then we can solve the problem of unemployment. We have with us Professor Gyan Gului from Italy. He's a deep economist. So I will request Dr. Gyan to share some of his reflections, and we will try to finish this talk by 5 to 6 minutes. Yes, Dr. Gyan, over to you.
Yes, thank you very much. I am audible because I am.
Yes.
Thank you very much.
You are audible.
Well, it was, of course, very, very interesting, very brilliant, both expositions. I hope to be able to say something. The first thing, perhaps, which comes to my mind is that, for instance, one of the chief economists of the World Bank already in the 90s, that is Mahbub Ulaq, the late Mahbub Ulaq, who died in 1998, already said that the plan of the economy was completely wrong in the 70s, in the 60s, and the 80s, because the only preoccupation, the only worry, the only aim was growth, and everything else will follow from the growth. And he already in the 90s criticized himself, that is, he exercised a kind of self-criticism and of criticism of the policies of the World Bank and of all the international organizations, and moreover also of the way of planning economy, which was holding in most of the countries of the world in the 90s. About these only the exclusive attention of the growth for the sake of the growth, and conversely the lack of attention for every other aspects of instructions, for instance, of the capabilities of the persons, and so on and so forth. That is the way of life of the persons. He said, for instance, that anyway, the growth is essential in order to have the resources to distribute, but growth is not the end, is only a middle for something. It is an instrument for something. And correspondingly, a government cannot say, well, I have only interest in the growth and I have no interest in all else, because in something else, because he said, for instance, it is a great difference if a government says, I am attracted by butter or I am attracted by weapons. That is the choice between butter and weapons. Unfortunately, it is an affirmation of one of the past dictatorships in Italy, that is Mussolini, who said to the people, do you want butter or weapons? And the answer was for him, weapons. But anyway, the sense of Mahbub Ulaq was the government should take a decision. And if the government wants the development of people, should employ the resources of the countries in butter. Of course, this goes without saying. The question is also now in many countries. I say I speak for Europe, for Italy, which is my country, but for the economic policy of the European Union, it seems that the only preoccupation is the struggle against inflation. And against the struggle against inflation goes to the disadvantage of policies for instance, for employment. That is, the policy of the European Union seems to be we can bear also 10%, also more of unemployment, in order to save the inflation, to save ourselves from the inflation, and to make our economy fit for export. That is, I think that the problem is growth and also this neo-mercantilistic policy, at least for Europe, which says the economy should go towards the exportation and not to the employment. This is, in my opinion, the problem of Europe. But anyway, you know, taking back the thought of Mabubulak, also he said already in the 90s, he underlined in the 90s problems which are nowadays also valid, which hold also unfortunately also nowadays. That is growth and no attention of nearly no attention to the, for instance, to the system of education. And if there is an attention for the system of education which is privileged is always or nearly always universities and not the middle education of the people. It is always, nearly always a question, a direction of elite-centric policy, because universities, of course, are already in the upper class, and not the middle class of the education, the middle range of the education of the students, of the scholars. I think that so listen to the both brilliant exposition. I thank you, of course, very much for the exposition.
Thank you.
I think that Mabubulak already said this, and I see with worries that many things are not going differently. Thank you very much. Anyway, it was really very, very brilliant. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Gyan. Very deep. Now I request Professor Anand Kumar, because of his initiative and with the help of Dr. Arun Kumar and Prashant Bhushanji, we have this report. So I would like to invite him to talk about the report.
Friends, today we had a landmark conversation by one of the most engaged people's economists of India, Professor Arun Kumar, and people's voice about the agricultural and rural India, Professor Dr. Devendra Sharma. It was a group of very concerned academicians, activists, and policy analysts. We had the focus of Professor Arun Kumar's presentation on a report which is a very outstanding work of some of the concerned, knowledgeable people from the public life of India, led by Professor Arun Kumar and very ably assisted by Prashant Bhushan, S.R. Hiremat, Bhavita Kumari, Anupam, and others. Let us look at the last line of the report presented by Arun a few months ago. He says that in brief, it is argued in this report that unemployment is a derived variable. It is determined by the system as a whole and not just a few variables. It depends on the rules of the game as to who gains and who is marginalized. There is an interlinkage between the two. The structure of the economy determines this. Thus, for full employment, and I repeat, thus for full employment, the structure of economy needs to be changed so that this state is permanently achieved and not just at some point of time. In brief, the losers are a victim of the system. Losers are a victim of the system put in place, and not because they're lazy or undeserving, as the gainers try to project to justify their own gains. This is where every statement of Professor Arun Kumar and Dr. Devendra Sharma are related with the voice of the country. We are victims of the system which has been constructed in last few decades in the name of efficiency, in the name of development, in the name of promoting job and promoting progress. And at the end of the story, we have farmers standing in protest for more than a year to change the system. Youth is engaged in self-protection through sporadic protest activities, which is going deeper and deeper. So I want you to look at this report, and this report is one of the contributions of Indian People's Movement, Desh Bachao Abhiyan, and we'll put this discussion on YouTube, and we hope that this will be also translated in Hindi, for most of the victims are also victims of our language structure, where English becomes the gateway into the world of opportunities. And if you don't know much English, then you're knowing Odia, Tamil, Bangla, Punjabi, Urdu, Hindi becomes useless. Thank you very much on behalf of Gandhian School for Democracy and Socialism. And we, as Ranjit Gautamji said, we'd like to invite Professor Arun Kumar and Dr. Devendra Sharma again, so that this public education, this demystification, and this practical intervention gets to connect with many more people. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Anand Bhai.
Thank you so much.
You know, I'd just like to say that we have already got it translated into Hindi, and the summary has been available in Hindi. We have collected through crowdfunding about 1 lakh rupees so that we can print some of these, because it's been translated to Marathi, Kannada, Odia, Bengali also. So we are trying to collect more funds through crowdfunding so that we can then bring out these and distribute to the youth in different areas. Also in Punjabi, it was promised when I went in January to Chandigarh, it was promised that in Punjabi also it get translated. And the groups in Punjab said they'll get it translated and distributed. So we are hoping that this movement will gather force. And if there's some crowdfunding possibility, then we can try and collect more funds and distribute more. Thank you very much for organizing this.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. I was saying that today's talk will be also translated in Hindi. So the summary of this nearly 100-page report, well documented with very valuable data and annexures, is approachable. And we also promise for the audience that Dr. Devendra Sharma will be invited for a fuller presentation, because the tragedy of rural India, contingent upon the problems of agriculture and agriculture-related industries, is to be understood more and more clearly, and there is need of collective action. Thank you so much, Arunji. Thank you so much, Devendra.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.